Masechet Orlah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, the first Mishnah in the new Masechet, Masechet Orlah. Before we start, actually, I want to dedicate this learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. And as always, even if you're new, welcome to our Mishnah Yomit. You can always reach me at rspolter@gmail.com. What in the world is Orlah? So in order to understand what Orlah is, we have to look at the psukim in the Torah. The Torah says explicitly, when you come to the land of Israel and you plant any fruit tree, Va'araltem orlato et piryo shalosh shanim, yelachem arilim lo yachel. Araltem arlato. It's a little hard to explain. Orla is really a foreskin. Okay, the arel, is a foreskin. It's the prohibited part. So the way we translate this pasuk, Va'araltem orlato, it means you should treat the fruit as prohibited for 3 years. Araltem orlato et piryo, you treat your fruit that you eat as orla for 3 years. Yelechem arelim, you should be uncircumcised. You shouldn't eat it. Lo yechel, can't eat it. So basically it means, during the first 3 years after you plant a tree, you can't eat the fruit. Ubashana haravi'it, yekol piryo kodesh hilulim la'Hashem. And the 4th year, all of your fruit should be kodesh hilulim la'Hashem. And we've learned that this kodesh hilulim is called netaravai. Netaravai means the plants of the 4th year, and you treat them like ma'aser sheni, and you take them to Yerushalayim. Then, ubashana chamishit tochlu et piryo. And by the 5th year, you could just eat them regularly. Lo sif lachem tvuato, ani Hashem elokechem. That is the din of Orlah. The basic din of Orlah, first 3 years, you can't touch it. It's Isur Hana. We'll see in later Mishnayot. It's totally prohibited. You're not allowed to benefit from it at all. And then, in the 4th year, Neta Ravai, the plant's Neta, the plant of Ravai, Reva, 4th year, Revi'i, and then the 5th year is regular. Okay. The Kahati notes as an introduction also, and we're going to see in later Mishnayot, and we're not going to see later, we'll see in later Mishnayot, that even though the Torah says, Ki tavo el haaretz, Orlah is not a mitzvah tluya ba'aretz. There's a halacha la Moshe Sinai, this is just passed down from Moshe Rabbeinu, that it's also in chutz la'aretz. It's one of the few halachot that appear in Seder Zvaim that's global. It's not just in Eretz Yisrael. So that's also an interesting point. And then there's also one more thing I'd like to discuss in the introduction that doesn't appear in any of the Mishnayot at all, which is how do you calculate the years? How do you figure out and it can be somewhat complicated. How do you figure out which years, so the 3rd years or the 4th years? So we're going to read the Rambam, and I made you a little chart. Says the Rambam, Be'echad b'Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah le'Orlah le'Ravai. So the Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of Tishrei. It's the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah. U'mei matay monim le'Orlah b'Tishrei, Misha the Orlah Ravai. So when do you start counting? How old is a tree? Misha ad netiyah, from the time that you plant it. Meaning, a plant could be, you count the years from the first, the birthday of trees, interestingly enough, is Rosh Hashanah. It's not Tu B'Shvat. We'll get to Tu B'Shvat in a second. Ve'ena moneh b'Rosh Hashanah l'Rosh Hashanah. You don't only count from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. I mean, if I plant we're in the middle of Tevet. We happen to be in the middle of Tevet. So if I plant now, I don't count from when I planted. That's not the birthday of the tree. The birthday of the tree is Rosh Hashanah. But I don't plant 0. If I plant it now, I don't not count until Rosh Hashanah. Ella, shloshim yom b'shana chashuvim shana. 30 days out of a year are considered a year. Only, v'hu shetiklot hanetiyah. That means, but I have to plant it in enough time for the roots to take root. Kodem shloshim yom, before those 30 days. V'kama histam klita, how much is the standard klita? L'chol ilanot shtei shabbatot. 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks for the roots to take root. Nimsat lameh, so the Rambam explains. So we learn from this. Shanotea arba'im v'arba'im yom kodem Rosh Hashanah. If I plant a tree 44 days before Rosh Hashanah, alta lo shana. Okay? It counts as a year. So, I have a year here. I'm in year 10, because the Rambam uses this example of year 10 in the Yovel. As long as I plant from the 15th day of Av, so 15th day of Av, it takes 2 weeks. This 15th day of Av, these 2 weeks here, and the 15th day of Av. Okay? Those 2 weeks it takes for the roots to take root. And then that leaves me an entire month, 30 days of Elul. And once those 30 days are over, once I have those 44 days, so the tree is a year old. So, and then, so that's 1. And then I can count 2 and 3. The Rambam explains very clearly. He says it clearly. Ketzad. How does that work? If in the 10th of the year of the Yovel, I plant a tree in the 15th of Av, Okay, so it's now in the years of Orlah. 1, 10th year, 11th, 12th, 3 years. So at the end of the 12th year, I'm now Rosh Hashanah of the 13th year. Now it's 3 years old. So can I eat it? No. Okay, until the 15th day of Shvat of the 13th year. So it's 3 years old, but until this time, it's considered Orlah, until Tu B'Shvat. Even though the fruits are ready after a few days. And the Rambam finishes, and then from the 15th of Shvat, from here, until of the 13th year, until Ad Chamisha Asa B'Shvat Mishnat Abba, so until the 14th, until the Tu B'Shvat of the next year, Neta Ravai. This is Hu Neta Ravai. You see, I've color-coded it for you. So that's the 15th year. That's 15th to the 15th Neta Ravai. Okay, V'tzarech Pidyon. And you either take it to Yerushalayim, but nowadays we don't, so we redeem it on money, and then the money we actually destroy because it's kadosh. And then the Rambam says if it's an Ibur Shana, etc., etc. So there's all kinds of interesting permutations, and so there's this interesting no man's land here because once the tree, anytime I plant the tree through this year, this is year 1, this is year 2, and this is year 3. But then you have to wait until Tu B'Shvat, which is also Rosh Hashanah Lilanot, in order to begin the Neta Ravai, and then the 15th, and then the next year. It's a little bit confusing. That's what the Rambam says. That's how you calculate it. Why this area and why Tu B'Shvat? You could look it up in the Iyun in the Rambam. Let's go on to the Mishnah. After that introduction, we're going to turn to the first Mishnah. Interestingly, the first Mishnah, the Mishnayot, talks immediately about what kind of trees are considered fruit trees for the purposes of Chayav and Orlah and Neta Ravai. So the Mishnah is going to tell us that it's only trees, even if it's fruit trees. If I plant, let's say, a pear tree because I like the pear wood, that's not considered Chayav and Orlah. Says, and I'll explain why. And then I can eat the fruits right away. Says the Mishnah, if I plant my trees, l'siyag, as a boundary or a border of my field, or I plant them, l'korot, I plant them in order to cut down the trees, in order to make beams, patur min Orlah. That is an example from the halachot of Orlah. Why? Says the Bartanura, dichtiv, as we saw in the pasuk, unetatem kol eitz ma'achal. They're called eitz ma'achal, fruit trees, and not fruit trees for eating. Etchu l'ma'achal chayav. That which I plant specifically for ma'achal, for eating, is chayav. The siyag u'lekorot u'leitzim, if I plant them as a border, or for beams, or for the branches, patur. Okay? Now, the Kahati explains that it's from the Yerushalmi, I think from the Yerushalmi, explains, from the Yerushalmi and the Rambam, right, that it has to be clear that you did it for that reason. Meaning, when you plant on the border, if I plant trees on the border, that I'm going to plant them very close together in order to make a border on my field. But if I plant them and then I say, oh, now I want them to be for a border, that doesn't work. Similarly, if I plant them for branches, I'm going to be cutting down branches all the time. But if I plant them and then I say, I'm going to take the branches, then they're Orlah trees. Rabbi Yossi says, Afilu Amar, hapnimi lema'achal, v'chatzion d'siyag. If I take one tree itself and I say, listen, the inside is I'm going to want for the fruit. But the outside of the tree I want for my border, hapnimi chayav, v'chatzion patur. The inside is chayav and Orlah, and then the outside I'm allowed to eat right away, even though it's one tree. Even though it's all one tree, nonetheless, I can divide between parts of trees. The Bartanura says, but ein halacha, Rabbi Yossi. We don't pass them like Rabbi Yossi. Okay, we'll stop here. And I have already told you how to reach me if you want to have a great day.